Evening, everybody. How's it going? Stand by with me here while I see what's happening. So that's promising. Let's just pop this out. There we go. I think that did it. Okay. I think I'm sorted. For some reason, coming over to this channel from my Comic Crack channel, it took a number of attempts to get something to work here. But I think that's it now. I believe I've got the chat. I've got everything going. Okay. Thanks very much. How is you all? How is y'all? What's going on? Holy smokes. It's been a while since I've done anything on this channel. It hasn't been a while because I haven't been playing games. I've been playing a ton of games. It's just been a while since I've had anything that I've wanted to film for this channel. I've been revisiting older games. Recently, I revisited Winter War. I posted a quick kind of video on the Comic Crack channel, which is the part of my YouTubing that just focuses on comic books and stuff. Quite a while ago, I wanted to separate both the channels. I wanted this one to be more board games focused instead of kind of having everything on one channel. I was doing a lot more back then, but it's reaching a point now where I've got a number of new games in the collection that I want to play, and I'm starting to play with my son, and we've spent a lot of time with things like war cults. I've spent a time, like I said, with a couple of the old Ares magazine games, as well as Winter War, just kind of replaying some of these games, because they're just the ones that I've replayed. They just have that replayable value, especially surprisingly, even something like Return of the Stainless Steel Rat, which is the paragraph game from Ares magazine. That one has a lot going for it, even on a replay. Ambush is another one that I did, and that was a hell of a lot of fun. I think I played 3 of the missions in there. There's still a few to go. My son has actually recently expressed interest in playing some of these or exploring these war games with me. So I think that's something that's going to happen as well. We may actually, I don't know which ones we're going to play. There's one here that we're probably going to attempt. So the purpose of today's kind of live hangout was just to kind of show off a little bit about some of the games that I've got recently that I'm most excited to try out. Maybe we won't start with those ones. So I have been off of Facebook for a long time. I don't know, probably a year ago. Sorry, this thing keeps going off here. Probably a year ago, maybe less, I rejoined with the sole purpose of joining Winnipeg Comic Addicts group and holding some auctions in that group. And that was the only focus of that piece of social media. I don't post anything on there. I don't follow people. I don't do any of that stuff. It's just for that one purpose only. But through that, I've discovered the Facebook Marketplace, which I think is a lot better than trying to deal with Kijiji. I think one of the main reasons that is because I just think people have moved away from sites like, I know Craigslist doesn't exist anymore, but Kijiji and those kind of websites where you can do like buy and sell. The Facebook Marketplace, it's just somewhere people are on Facebook a lot more. They're just kind of, it's part of their day. So they are just creating these listings on that platform as opposed to anything else. So there was a game that popped up there that I had to jump on locally, which is also the benefit of this better marketplace. When it comes for me in Canada, getting games even if I find games where the price for the actual game is really, really great, by the time I throw in the shipping, pardon me, by the time you throw in the shipping, more often than not, it just jacks up the price of the games to such a degree that it doesn't become worth it anymore. Not to say that I never order games and stuff online. Depends on the rarity of the game, and depends on just honestly how bad I want it. So this was a great find. This has been on my list for quite a while. I believe Callendale did some videos on Board Game Geek about it, but this is called Titan, and I think this version was 1981. It's a bookcase game number 839. Focus. And there's a look at the back too. You get a sense of what the map looks like. Overall, it's in pretty good shape. It's got a split on the box lid there, but really, I'm totally fine with that. My son and I have played it a couple of times now. He's whooped my ass both times. Let's just get that down on video. But this one's a hell of a lot of fun. We really dig Cave Evil and War Cults, and part of what's so fun about those games is kind of befriending or creating creatures and having them join your squad. So that kind of reflects itself in this game as well, except this one is more kind of mythical creatures and wizards and giants and trolls and that sort of thing. The counters are oversized. There, for example, is a focus, a serpent. Focus. Take up the whole frame and focus. No, it's not going to focus. Anyway, there you go. That's sort of something. So, as usual with these games, the graphics are definitely a draw. The look of the game itself is a draw. Once I got the game, I made this counter tray out of black foam core, and just to kind of keep everything organized, because that's where the meat of the game is. Anything that I can do with these games to make the setup go that much quicker, I find beneficial, even though this was pretty difficult and time consuming to do. At the end of the day, it was completely worth it, because then when we sit down, I just have to open the lid and then we just go. I made a little custom lid for this counter tray as well too, with the graphics from the very first version of Titan that had come out years earlier, late 70s. So it's a really fun game. Now that we're getting the hang of it, the gameplay itself it goes a little faster. One of the things I will say about it is you can really get hung up with going spot to spot and creating more creatures and then splitting off your team. Your team itself, each different stack can only have 7 counters on it. Once you hit 7, you won't be able to build any more creatures, so you have to split your team up. Each team has to have a minimum of 2 creatures in it and a maximum of 7. So you can split it up as many times as you want, up to 12. Each kind of faction only has 12 different counters to kind of mark with. So once you've done your 12, then it's all over. Rasa, how are you? Nice to see you. Welcome to the gaming side of my life here. So once you hit 12, then that's when you have to kind of stop. So there can be a little bit of a slow, yeah, exactly. What am I doing in this channel? It's kind of been non-existent for the longest time. You kind of hit a point where you can really get stuck in creating creatures instead of fighting. So there is kind of a lull with the game at one point, but we've managed to power through that and then start kicking each other's ass. So beyond that, our local C4, which is a comic convention, or it's touted as a comic convention, it's more a pop culture convention that has comic books. They have a lot of different people that rent booths there. There's a local gaming, I guess, legend in Winnipeg who had, I think it was called Pendragon Games, Paladin Games. I can't remember the name of his actual store. He had a table there. I don't know him. I've talked to him since I met him at C4. And I'm hoping to try to, yes, came to disturb your train of thought with comics. Absolutely. No, I'm focused here, Rasa. I'm focused. I've been talking to him a little bit. I'm trying to get in touch with him he's got a garage filled with games, and he's a big war gamer from kind of the 60s and 70s. He's been playing, he tells me. So I'm trying to get a chance to go and visit his spot and see what else he has, because another game from my list is Freedom in the Galaxy from SPI. He had a couple of things on his table that looked really interesting, but like I said, this was high on my list. It's kind of a Star Wars parody, where one person plays the rebel forces and one person plays the kind of Imperial army. The rebel forces have to go kind of solar system to solar system, planet to planet, to start a revolution. And of course, the Imperial type army is the Imperial army. It's not going to work, Rasa. The Imperial army job is to stop the rebels from doing that. I just wanted to try to pull out the mat. We haven't played this one yet. This will be the next one that goes on the table, I think. If you love the cover, Rasa, wait until you see the interiors. The thing with these older games, so this one was nice. It actually came with a counter tray, which doesn't always happen. Some of the games that I've found, they don't have the counter tray, just everything is in baggies. The thing with these older games that always appeals to me, I have to like the look of the game first. I'm a very visual person, speaking of comics. I do like the design. So the design has to speak to me, and then the game itself has to speak to me. So here's the map on this one, or the board game, or the game board, rather. And you're just tracking planet to planet. I do not have a script. I don't work with a script. I work without a net, Rasa. It's all just from my sharp, incredibly sharp and focused mind that these words just come out of my mouth, and I focus on things like not saying like that much. So the beauty with some of these older games too is you can play it in a couple of different phases. There's one game at the beginning where you're just focusing on one planet, and then there's the secondary step of the game where you're focusing kind of on one province that has a number of planets on it. And then the third and final game, you're using the entire map and using the entire universe. So it's another good one because there's videos out there already, which is great. So the other thing you get with this is Freedom in the Galaxy Galactic Guide, a short little booklet just talking about the characters that are in the games and a little bit of history of the characters, the weapons that you can get in the games and the history of that. So they really managed to create a world in a box. And then there's also the rules of play. This one is 32 pages. Yeah, 32 pages. The last page is some notes, though, so I guess 31 pages of instruction. And again, because you can break it down in such a way, there's different sections for each game that you can play. You can see 3 columns, fairly small type. So these kind of games are a commitment for sure, but once you get the handle on it, it becomes much easier, which is also why I appreciate Board Game Geek and the ability for just the users to upload their own videos. Watching the videos of somebody playing the game really helps make everything make sense. So when I go and kind of scan through the rules and kind of start digging into the game, at least I have a general idea of what's coming. Finally, again, through the marketplace, Games to recommend for a total beginner. That's a really good question. I mean, it really, honestly, Rasa, it really depends on what kind of thing you're into when it comes to this style of gaming, this hex and counter style of gaming. Um, Thematically, that's really an important thing. With war games, and I've talked about it before on this channel, with games that are kind of their main purpose is combat simulation and recreating these wars. If you don't like that theme, it's probably not something to go. Um, the magazine games versus the boxed games. Some of the magazine games can still be fairly complex. Honestly, the one that worked for me and the reason why I revisited it recently was a game called Winter War, and that was a magazine game. And that is an earlier kind of war game when wargaming had started kind of becoming popular. This was a very early one. And the rule set is fairly straightforward. There's quite a few videos on Board Game Geek already about Winter War, the gameplay itself. That one does have elements of almost like a chess game played out on a map. Yes, there's the historical side that you can get into if you choose to, but I just find it a really, really sharp game. The components are beautiful, the design is really beautiful, and I think the game plays really well. Even though even at this point I still make the odd mistake here and there, it doesn't halt my enjoyment of it. Um, Something that I think would be worth checking out for especially you, Rasa, would be maybe more of the sci-fi type of games. I'll talk about these in a minute. I won't go into much detail here, but or right away, I recently received a couple of Ares magazine games in the mail again. My audio keeps cutting out. Okay, that's good to know. Everything looks like it's registering here. Um, Ares magazine is a good one to get into because they have some games that are a little shorter, a little easier to get a handle on. And out of all those Ares magazine games, I would say a nice one to start off with would probably be Wreck of the Bsm Pandora or Rescue from the Hive is a really good one to look out for. I think Rescue from the Hive also came as a boxed version, but then the thing always becomes getting these games. It takes a little bit of time. As far as new games that are coming out now, anything from the Cave Evil family or that group of guys, like Psycho Raiders, Freak Face, Mushroom Eaters, War Cults, all of those games, they have a magazine game coming out right away. They're much easier to find because they're a new company. With some of these older games, you really just have to hit the secondary market, which again on Board Game Geek, the website Board Game Geek, it's laid out like that. You can search by the game, and then there's a marketplace attached to every single game. You can subscribe to those individual pages, and then you'll get notifications when something comes for sale. And honestly, for you, Rasa, there's a number of sellers for some of these games. I'm surprised at how many people overseas have copies of these games. I think I was at a point where I just assumed a lot of these, because they were made in North America, that all the sellers that I would find would be from the United States or Canada. It's incredible. It's incredible how many of these made it all around the world, you know. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, right? That these aren't kind of 30-minute family games. They are an investment. So Cave Evil, as easy as it is once you start playing it, or once you've played it a number of times, there absolutely is a really it's a bit of a higher threshold to, you really have to commit to it. But the thing is, it's so rewarding once you actually get into it. It's an incredibly rewarding experience because you can really just get into a story. And then, of course, the other option, instead of going for the actual physical copies, there's all sorts of modules out there. One that I have on my computer, I haven't really tried it that much because, again, I prefer the actual boxed games themselves. There's a thing called Vassal, Vassal, and an app, or I guess a program that goes on your computer, and you can play some of these games. You can download the modules, the games themselves, and play them virtually on the computer with people all around the world. There is still, you do still have to know the rules. You do still have to understand how to play the game. It's not a tutorial type of game, but once you start getting into that world, there's a whole bunch of forums when it comes to these vassals and the modules, and I'm sure finding the right group, you can find somebody that's going to teach you how to play the game on vassal. So that's also an option for sure. But again, I would say these games, they're a commitment for sure. It's not let's whip out Cave Evil and just play for a half an hour. We bring Cave Evil out and we're playing for about 4 hours. You know, we're spending an afternoon playing one game, which we love. So another one that I found recently is, and one that I'm actually pretty excited to get into is Car Wars. It's a Steve Jackson game. I believe they're going to be re-releasing this. Some of these games, they started as a very small pocket type game. And they're looking at reissuing some of these in a new kind of format. And Steve Jackson Games is a company that's going to be putting out a lot of their older games, including things like Kung Fu 2100, which is a really fun little game. Those ones are actually not a bad start there, Rasa. Steve Jackson Games, I'd have a look on their site. Some of these gaming companies, they'll have games that are specifically for beginners. This one doesn't have a rating, but sometimes you'll see on the back of the box, it'll be a little rating system of, is it a beginner game? Is it an intermediate or an expert? Does it play well solo, or does it play better with like 2 to 4 people or 4 to 6 people, etc.? So I would look at Steve Jackson Games. That would be something worth checking out, because they do have some games that I think are a lot more manageable. They don't take as much time. The thing that takes time in this one is creating your cars, but the game itself is fairly short from what I understand in the videos that I've seen. Obviously, the more players that you have, the longer the game can play. This one is basically creating cars, going on a map, and trying to destroy your opponent. So if it's 2 people playing, you're probably looking at like a half an hour to an hour, depending on how long it takes you to destroy the other person. The thing that fascinates me about this, I'm not much of a car guy or anything. I'm not much of a sports guy, and I'm not much of a car guy. So that side of it isn't as appealing. The one thing that really struck me about this game once I started looking into it a little more was the fact that how you plot movement on a map with these kind of little chits that are these cars. There's a turning key that has all these angles cut out in it, and that's how you turn your vehicle, and how you plot it out on a map, I think, is pretty fascinating. I'll just show you since it's really handy. This is the turning key itself. So you can see here you have different angles. So you line up your car along a straight edge, and if I wanted to turn, then I'd kind of lay it against that edge and that edge and that edge to kind of make an actual turn. The time, it's like a few seconds. The entire game takes place over a few seconds in kind of the game time. And that's been my problem as well, Rasa. There's not a lot of people around here to play games with. Luckily, my son has played games since he was a child, so he's really into it, which is also why I try to look for some games that are more solo-friendly, Ambush being one of them. That's an incredible solo game. It's meant for solo play. You follow a story. There's paragraphs that you read as you're playing parts of the games. It'll tell you to refer to different paragraphs where things happen to you and you have to react. That stuff is really fascinating. And there's lots of great, I would say, and honestly, Rasa, I would say start your son out at an early age. There's plenty of games. I think when I started really playing games with Jaden, he was probably, I mean, Lily's 5 now when we play games with her now. Games like Blue's Clues, Toy Story. I've got a great Toy Story game where you move around a board and you reveal secrets underneath these little discs and collect cards and stuff like that. And she's probably been playing games since she was about 4. So she's probably been playing a good solid year at this point. So setting her on the path. And Jaden was probably about the same. It just so happens that some of the things that I like, some of the themes that I like, I mean, partially because obviously he is my son, so he's going to have some of those interests anyway, I think, because he's surrounded with them. Luckily, he likes a lot of the themes. So when we play something like Cave Evil, he gets a huge kick out of it because that's exactly the kind of thing he's into as well, which is great. So, I mean, I've lucked out in that regard. Otherwise, I wouldn't have anybody to play these games with. My wife plays some of the games with us, but she doesn't. We haven't kind of immersed her fully into these kind of worlds. I think because they're a little more intense. She's not afraid of intense games by any stretch. She's played some games with us that last a couple hours, and she's fine with it. It's just this style, I think, is too far into the next step. And Lily finds the games fun. She really enjoys it. But again, I think it's because of her surroundings. You know, I've always been a big gamer. Ever since I was a kid, I played board games. So she's grown up in that environment. She's seen Jaden and I play games from when she was a baby. She sat on my lap while I was playing card games or while we were playing Marvel Legendary, which is that deck building game, which is a hell of a fun game, actually, Rasa. Look into Marvel Legendary. I would highly recommend that one. That one's a much easier game to understand, and it's really, really fun. You create your own teams with all the Marvel superheroes. There's expansion packs you can get. By no means do you need to have them. If you just get the base game, it's incredibly fun, and you fight a different kind of mastermind every single game. The base game, I think, comes with 5 different masterminds, 5 or 6. And different storylines. It is an amazing game, and that's a game that my wife easily got into. She's not opposed to gaming. It's just not something that's been a huge part of our world. She turned her nose up at it at first, and then we sat her down at the table and had her play with us. She was winning and then eventually did win, but she got into it pretty quickly once she saw how fast it moved and how it could go. And I would highly recommend that one, Rasa. I think you'll really get a kick out of that. And that's the thing, finding those games that you can just get into. Plus, it's a newer game as well, so it shouldn't be that difficult to find. I'm sure they have releases over there in the UK. It's nothing that I don't think you'll have to order away from overseas. I don't know, obviously, but I'm assuming that it's something that's had a very wide release. But once she got into it, she loved it, and we've played that, I don't know how many times. We've played it dozens of times, and she routinely kicks our ass. She's really, really good at it. She's just got a knack at playing it. There was one other thing I was going to say on that same thread, but I don't remember. Anyway, that's something that I think would really appeal to you. So finally, the final thing that I received in the mail yesterday, on my hunt for all of the Ares magazine games, I'm at a point where I've almost completed them. I found another few online. Yeah, they do. They even have Secret Wars, correct. And they also have one called Legendary Villains, where you can play the bad guys and you have to kind of beat the good guys. So they just completely reverse it, where you play a bunch of villains fighting the superheroes and you have to win. So when it gets to expansions, there's a load, and some of the art on some of them are really, really good too. There's a couple of the expansions where the art wasn't as good, but for the most part, it's fantastic art. So I found on Board Game Geek a couple of more. I found a guy that's selling actually a bunch of magazines. He's got a few more Ares magazines that I don't have, but I could only afford to get these 2 at first, and I was going to see how it went, what kind of condition they were, and I'll probably hit them up for those other games. So this is Ares Magazine issue number 16, and it's a game called the High Crusade. The subject matter of this one isn't super appealing to me. It's about this kind of a religious crusade across the galaxy. But because it's an Ares game, I will more than likely give it a shot. There's some videos that have popped up on Board Game Geek as well about this one, so that's going to make it easier. So here's the map itself of the galaxy. Very kind of psychedelic looking. Yeah, I mean, I'm just so drawn to this stuff. I can't. I just don't have words for it. It's just, it really visually appeals to me in a huge way. This one, surprisingly enough, has never been played. So here's the counter sheet that is unpunched. So there's the front side of the counters, and then the back side of the counters. So that's kind of exciting, having basically a brand new game from the Ares magazine. And then finally from Ares, super excited about this one. I've wanted to play this one ever since I discovered these Ares magazine's games existed. This is one that's been high on the list. The Voyage of the Bsm Pandora from Ares magazine #6. So the Wreck of the Pandora came out first, and I guess that was fairly successful within the Ares magazine world, so they did kind of a prequel. The idea here is you're exploring the different planets and trying to find creatures. And it's a paragraph game again, so you're referring to a story as you're going through. You're determining what the atmosphere is by die rolls and stuff. So here's the map. Every little section here is a different planet, and here's your kind of galactic chart on the side where you're plotting your movement. You come into the game board here and you go and visit all these planets, and you have a certain amount of months to complete your mission. I believe 30. Yes, you have 30 months to complete your mission. In the Wreck of the Bsm Pandora, the spaceship is dead in space. It's dead in space, and you have to kind of contain the creatures that you've captured because they're now breaking out of their kind of isolation pods. So I know something exists already, but I'm sure there's a way to combine both of these games together. So starting your gameplay with Voyage of the Bsm Pandora, keep exploring the galaxies and don't actually make it back, and just kind of lose your ship in space, and then transfer all the creatures that you've captured into the Wreck of the Bsm Pandora game and start playing that one. I'm very excited to play this one. There's a number of gameplay videos on this one on YouTube and Board Game Geek to give you a really good sense. So I feel like I have a fairly good sense of how to play. Apparently the bookkeeping in this one is pretty epic. I have all my games at the top of the bookshelf, so the kids can't get to them. The bookshelf games that I have, the war style games, I just have them up on books. My kids have been taught from an early age to be careful with stuff and to take care of their things as well as my things. I've just kind of instilled it in them. But most of the games are way up on a top shelf that they can't reach. Jaden is just now getting to a height where he can grab the games. The magazine games, I have them in a big folder, in a big binder. Each of the magazines, I put in one of these sleeves because I'm an anal collector nerd. I do put the magazines in a official Comic Crack magazine bag and board, and then I put the map and everything at the back. They all go in the sleeve, and then it clicks into a binder, which then is up at the top of the shelf. So they're accessible. These ones I don't want to put in my magazine boxes because then they'll just become something that I collect and not actually play. I do want to play all of these games. So I find myself, now that this has come in the mail, there was a number of moments today where I was thinking about this game. I cannot wait to give it a shot. I have to leave for bowling right away. It's our bowling league night, so I don't think I'm going to get a chance to play it tonight. but I'm hoping to try to get to it this week at some point. So very, very excited. I think I need, I don't know, 3 or 4 Aries, like I think 2 or 3 actual Aries magazines that came with games, and then I think there was 1 or 2 special edition Aries magazines that didn't have a game attached to them. So I've got pretty much all of them now, and I think there's 2 of the games so far. One that I haven't played because the theme doesn't interest me whatsoever, and it is so unbelievably complex. Even after watching a video about it, I can't even follow the video, so I just haven't even given it a shot because it just doesn't appeal to me in any way, shape, or form. There's another game, Barbarian Kings, I think, which is kind of part of another bigger gaming system. So I didn't really dive into that one because I didn't want to get into an entire new gaming system. But every other Aries magazine game that I have played, I've really enjoyed. So if you did explore Aries, Rescue from the Hive is incredibly fun. And like I said, these Pandora games are really fun. Yeah, so I would go for it if you can find them, and if you really want to give it a shot, go for it. And a lot of these games, they can be soloed. You can play them solo, even if you are playing a couple of people. It does work. Obviously, it's a lot more fun playing against somebody else. For sure, it is. But barring that, I would just rather do something like that than sit and watch TV. It's just not my thing anymore, watching stuff. I don't know if it's partially due to my job that I've kind of burnt out on watching things, but it's just not my go-to to sit down and watch TV or a movie much these days. I'd much rather sit at a table for a few days in a row, kind of picking away at a game, and I just find it much more relaxing. Let me know if you get Marvel Legendary and you do give it a shot. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about it. If you are curious about it a little more, next year when we kind of do a chat, we can always do like an offline chat, like something that's not live, and I can show you the basics of the game, or just show you the components and just talk about the basics of the game. It is fairly straightforward, and I think out of all of the games that I play that pop into my mind, that one I think you'd really, really like. Hell, you can play Doctor Strange, you know what I mean? Like you can play Daredevil, you can play Spider-Man, you get to create your own superhero team and go on these missions. You can even try to recreate storylines if you get enough characters and enough of the expansions. You can create your own storylines directly from the comics if you want, you know. But like I say, just the base game will be plenty of game for you to start with. So with that, it's 6:17. I do have to get rolling. Literally, I have to go bowling. It's league night. Thanks very much for tuning in. So what's coming for the future of this channel? I'd like to do some videos for this channel next year. And I think it'll be a look at some of these games. Again, I don't want to put too much time making videos into games where there's already videos that exist. But some of them, they don't have much of as much of a presence. Car Wars specifically didn't really have too much in the way of gameplay videos, so I think I might end up doing a video for that. So look for that in the future. More than likely, when I figure out something like High Crusade, I'll probably end up doing a video about that one. I'd love to put my 2 cents in with something like Voyage of the Bsm Pandora, especially if I can figure out a really smooth way to transition both of those games together to play it as one big game. I think it would be worth it to make a video about that. And I mean, we're always playing something. The new horror magazine from the KV Wolf gentleman is in the mail. I got notification of it yesterday in an email. So it is complete and it's on its way. It's called See Evil. So that's a magazine game that'll be coming. And I know that I'll be doing a video about that at some point because I normally do. So I'm going to try to show the Astral Hex Encounter channel a little more love in the new year, and we'll have some more conversations and we'll play some games together. Right on. Thanks very much for tuning in, Rasa. It was great to see you. Thanks for joining me over here on the non-comic book channel, even though you did manage to get us talking about comics a little bit through Marvel Legendary. Thanks very much for watching. And for those of you watching in the future, thanks very much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. And enjoy your games. We'll talk to you.